Good morning and welcome back. You're watching Newsx. I'm Rishabh Gulati. Ladies and gentlemen, the focus where we spent the past 24 hours has been in the city of Tianjin in China, where the SCO banquet has ended. The SCO meeting is happening today. As I've been saying for the past 24 hours, the SCO has its place in the multilateral fora of the world. There are so many others. I can think just in South Asia between ASEAN and SAARC and BIMSTEC and IBIN and RIC. There are many regional trade alliances. So the SCO summit has a part in this. The SCO organization has a future, but it is and was designed with the agenda of looking after the interests, security, otherwise and economic in Central Asia. It is an organization that's been put together primarily by the Chinese, in which we are participants. Over the course of the past 24 hours, we've had to walk a very difficult tightrope in balancing our priorities. And our priorities have become very clear. We are not aligned to someone, we are not allied to someone. We are looking after a very reasonable self-interest, and that is India's economy is growing at 7.8%. How do we keep it that way? It is in the interests of the world that India's economy continues to grow at a healthy, reasonable rate. It is in the interest of India that the American economy doesn't go into recession. We are not cheering on some economic disaster in the US, because if there's any recession in the US or stagflation in the US, that's an impact for all of us. We don't want that. We don't want these tariff wars. We don't want to see the war in Ukraine continuing. We don't want to see the Chinese collapse and be taught some lessons. Absolutely not. They pulled a lot of people out of poverty. It's for the good of humanity. We have differences on many existential issues, but it is not in our interest for the Chinese economy to nosedive either, nor the Japanese economy. The entire concept on which the world systems are based, the human systems are based, the end of history, as Francis Fukuyama would call it, is that in free trade and capital markets, it's a positive sum game. Efficiencies and specialization make us all better off. It's not you versus me. And with that premise, we have to understand that India and Russia have a long association. There is a reason India and Russia have a long association. And the reason is that the Western powers, led by the US, picked a side, and the side was Pakistan. They sent the 7th Fleet to threaten India under Nixon. Now, a generation past remembers that. This generation, my generation, has been trying for a long time to convince both Indians and Americans that their future lies together. We are not a death to America country. We don't wish ill on America. Many of us migrate to America, take the highest positions in the C-suites of various startups, do innovation there, bring wealth to America, and we want to bring wealth here. We want to work together. We want to be better together. So I know things have gotten out of hand, and here is an example of how things get out of hand. Breaking developments coming in this morning. White House trade advisor Peter Navarro has now again said things of which I assure you he has not much understanding, and the game that he's trying to now play makes no sense. While he was accusing India of laundering Russian oil to fund the war in Ukraine, this is what he has now said, and I quote, "India is nothing but a laundromat for the Kremlin. You got the Brahmins profiteering at the expense of the Indian people. We need that to stop." Now, when you start increasingly sounding like George Soros, when you start saying that, all right, you know, there's a caste issue in India and it's the Brahmins who are making all the money, you have absolutely no understanding, and what you're trying to do is achieving nothing. So I have a humble suggestion to anybody watching this broadcast, because if you're an Indian, and I'm not a Brahmin, but if you're an Indian and you are now, whether you are an Indian living in the US and probably a Republican voter, you're probably there at the various events to support Donald Trump, and I know a lot of them, and you are now boiling in your stomach and getting really upset of people who know nothing about these matters passing this kind of commentary, and you want to give it back, this is where things start going wrong. So, let's dial it down. We have a disagreement. As far as India is concerned, it's a principled disagreement, and let me underline this. It is Donald Trump and his administration, Peter Navarro and everybody else, it's their duty to figure out the best for the American people. Tariff conversations are legitimate conversations. All countries, including the United States, has now infamously so, apply tariffs. India applies tariffs. It is India's responsibility to look after what it considers its interest. When two great countries sit together, each looking out for their own interest, it is for them to decide that there is a confluence of these interests to come to an agreement. All tariff negotiations in the world are normal, they happen all the time, and they are legitimate. So, if the premise was, as we understood it just a few years ago, that should India be investing in purchasing more, creating more jobs in the US? The answer is yes. Should India be buying planes for Boeing? The answer is yes. We need the planes. We have a booming aviation sector. We have the money to spend. Why shouldn't the money not be spent on American companies who are making products that we require, that in turn generates jobs in the US? That's the win-win. That's free trade and capital markets for you. We need weaponry. We are the world's largest weapons importer. So, let us buy the Apache helicopters and the howitzers from the Americans, because we need them, and of course, then that keeps high-end manufacturing skilled jobs in the US. Win-win. That's the conversation that is perfectly legitimate. When you start going down this slippery slope of just hurling curses at each other, it becomes a very slippery slope. Now, there is a marked difference between freedom of speech, which all Indians enjoy, which all Americans enjoy. So, people having a go at each other is a separate matter. People in administratively important posts or advisory posts are expected on all sides to dial it down, and what Peter Navarro has just done with very little understanding and on the basis of some advisement. Now, I won't call him an expert on the Brahminical system or caste system, just like I am not an expert on race issues in America. But I can tell you very reasonably that those race issues do exist. I am assuming that America has a future in becoming a better version of itself, and I hope that happens. But now, I can give you a lecture on those race issues, and you would look at me ironically of what knowledge I have of those race issues, limited. So, here it is, strange. All right, let me just absorb what is taking place, because this is not the first time he's spoken. Brahmins are profiteering by buying Russian oil at the expense of the Indian people. India is a laundromat for the Kremlin. India is getting in bed with authoritarians. Everybody in America loses because of what India is doing, because we got to fund Modi's war. The war in Ukraine is India's fault. Now, I very strongly remember a Secretary of State, a retired general from the US Armed Forces, sitting before the United Nations Security Council, talking and telling the world with a paper presentation with charts of all the weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. I find it strange that a Clinton administration employee is currently the unelected leader of Bangladesh. The past history of dealing with dictators is not with India, because it was Donald Trump that was hosting the Pakistani army chief for dinner in the White House just a few weeks ago. So it's at the hypocrisy level, we've lost the plot. So now we have to dial it down a little bit. So while we can rant and rave back at Peter Navarro, thankfully sensible people in India's government are not doing these things. Sensible people who work in our foreign service, who are involved in these processes in the commerce and trade departments, they're not doing these things. We'll have to hold our lip and tongue before we completely lose the plot, and Mr. Navarro would be advised the same. India and America are going to be doing business with each other. It is inevitable, and we are going to have to work with each other. Maybe not tomorrow, but next week. That's also inevitable, and we don't want to bring it down to this sewage level with a lack of understanding. Then it just becomes the point of departure. Let's listen in to what Peter Navarro has said. My guests are with us this morning. Megha is also with us from Tianjin, and we'll open up this conversation. Listen in to what he said.
Understand what's going on here. You got Brahmins profiteering at the expense of the Indian people.
Okay, that's the comment he's made to a US newscaster through the course of the late evening in the US as they go into late night and we go into early morning on this side of the world.